everybody, and welcome to the House of Nostalgia. Today's video is on the adult entertainer, Mr. John Holmes. The first time I saw a John Holmes movie, I was in high school. I remember seeing names like John Holmes and Marilyn Chambers, and I would see these names on the theater marquee. Now, these theaters wasn't on State Street, they were like around the corner on the side streets. If you wanted to see what was at the movies every week, you would read it in the Sun-Times or the Chicago Tribune newspaper. So I would always notice John Holmes' name. And this was before I was even old enough to go downtown without my parents. I had a couple of older brothers who were still living upstairs, and sometimes when they leave, I would go up there and ramble around in their stuff. And one day I found a John Holmes and Marilyn Chambers movie and I watched it. When I watched this movie, they were in a gym setup. And the first thing I remember was being disappointed. I found him not to be attractive at all. And when you're young, that's the first thing that you go by. Now, what I was supposed to notice about him, I just wasn't that impressed at all because the looks came first to me. And the second thing that I noticed was that this movie was old. You could tell even by their hairstyles. And later in life, I realized why the movie looked like the 70s. He was no longer making movies like that anymore when I was in high school. Well, not in the United States. I saw a E-channel documentary on John like around 2000 or 2001, and you couldn't turn away from it. And this is when I learned about the Wonderland murders, because before this documentary, I knew nothing about these horrific murders. And of course, in 2003, the movie came out. John Holmes' life spiraled so far out of control that he put his wife and girlfriend, yes, wife and girlfriend, in danger by witnessing one of the most horrific murders in history. He was in that house, all while trying to feed a raging crack addiction. He became a criminal, a pimp, prostitute, thief, and he became just a dangerous man to be around, period. Nothing seemed to matter more than his habit. A memorable quote by James Baldwin said, "We will all pay for what we do and more for what we have done to ourselves, and we will pay by the life that we live." Let's get into it. John C. Holmes was born on August the 8th, 1944. He was raised in Asheville, Ohio, along with his three other siblings by his mother, Mary Holmes, and his stepfather, Edward Holmes. Now, John was the only child who had a different father. His other siblings was older than him, but his mother kept divorcing and remarrying Edward. So John was born by another man named Carl Estes, and his father didn't sign the birth certificate. So John had a hard time growing up in that house. His stepfather was an abusive alcoholic, and his mother was very religious. So that situation already was unbalanced. So John had to escape the dysfunction in his life, and his mother signed for him to go to the service at the age of 15. Now, while he was in the service, he did get a chance to see different parts of the world. So after completing 3 years, he received an honorable discharge. He moved to Los Angeles, where he worked a bunch of different jobs. He met Sharon, and they got married in August the 21st in 1965. Now, John started out in the entertainment industry by taking nude photos. Someone suggested that he take these photos to make quick money, and that was around 1968. Now, that's something that is known, but how it come about, nobody really knows, because even though John did interviews early in his career, you couldn't believe a word he said. He went straight from 1965 working to 1968 taking still nude photos. He started making adult movies around 1970, but they became mainstream starting with the movie Deep Throat in 1972, then came Behind the Green Door in 1973. And this is when the movie started showing up in real movie theaters. That movie made the industry millions of dollars, which later turned into $1 billion business. But now it's a sick and gutter butt business, and it will never be what it once was. John became Johnny Wad, which was his most popular adult character. He was box office gold in the entertainment industry, and he was known for something big. Now, the way he was described in the industry, it kind of reminds you of Mark Wahlberg's character in the movie Boogie Nights. Not the whole movie, but when he was discovered. That movie kind of bit off of John's life in a way, but they just didn't go as hard as John Holmes' life really was. Now, by this time, he was still married to his wife and started dating an underage girl named Dawn. And he was making up to $3,000 a movie, and he was making daily movies, so he was getting paid. And this was in the mid-70s. This was also around the time that he started developing a serious cocaine habit that started on the set of these movies, and it quickly turned into a freebasing habit, which was later, as we all know, became crack cocaine. Freebasing was a new drug in the later part of the 70s, and a lot of people really didn't realize what was happening to them that early. He started running scams, stealing, prostituting himself to men, and prostituting his underage girlfriend. He did all of this for that drug. It wasn't about the movies anymore for John. He wasn't interested in doing any movies. It was about his habit, and nobody would hire him anyway. And his drug habit was raging, and it happened real quick, and we all know how that go. He met a man named Eddie Nash who owned a bunch of nightclubs, and he also was a drug dealer and a dangerous man. So John ran up an expensive tab with Nash, and he would prostitute his girlfriend to help pay off his drug debts. And that eventually ran out because she finally got tired and left. And this part of John Holmes' life was made into a movie named The Wonderland Murders. John could no longer get drugs from Nash. He owed him too much money. So he started seeking out other ways to feed his habit, and he met these dealers and addicts that lived in this apartment house on Wonderland Avenue. And they really didn't like John, but he didn't care because it was all about feeding his habit. Now, one day while John was getting high with these people, he sold Nash out and set him up to get robbed by his new crew. John hung out with Nash one night and unlocked the sliding glass back door before leaving Nash's house. Now, after I watched this part of the movie, it made me not trust anybody after they left my house. I still tell people about this scene in the movie even now. They went in there and robbed Nash for everything, which was a lot of drugs, money, and jewelry. And they tied Nash and his bodyguard up and left. The crew stayed within walking distance from this man, and they was very naive when it came to Nash. He knew right away that John set him up, so he returned the favor by using John to set them up, and they went in there with John and took 4 people's life in that home. And it was only one survivor who remembered nothing. And they used metal pipes and baseball bats and beat these people to death, and they had John with them. After the trial, his wife finally divorced him. And for some miracle, John Holmes was found not guilty, and he wasn't the only one. Really, it was only just one person who went to prison for those murders, and it was Eddie Nash, and that was years later. His bodyguard died before he was able to pay for his alleged crimes. addicts started walking in from the street and robbed the house of drugs and money while the bodies were still laying on the floor. None of them even attempted to call the police. People would look at this as a second chance in life. He beat murder charges, and he was there during the murders, but not John. He just didn't see it that way. He actually went back to the only thing that he knew to do besides drugs, and that was porn. After all of this, his mother gave him his original birth certificate, where he found out his real father was named Carl Estes. Now, reading that reminded me of the movie Bastard Out of Carolina. Now, I'm pretty sure she felt in some way responsible for how he turned out, because that's what mothers do, even when you did all you could. But even that was too late for John. He still didn't change. He appeared in a gay porn movie and later contracted HIV. Now, his adult movie career was supposed to be over, but it wasn't. He went out of the country and made porn films unprotected, knowing that he was HIV positive. He married porn actress Lori Rose on January the 23rd in 1987, and he passed away the following year on March the 13th, 1988, and he was only 43 years old. Nothing about this story surprised me at all, mainly because I watched the spread of this drug in the mid-70s. We have harder drugs out here today, but to be able to watch the biggest drug in history take over households, neighborhoods, and then cities. If you wasn't on this drug back then, you was called a survivor because you became a target. I would only be surprised about the outcome of John's life if drugs wasn't involved. I would like to thank you all so much, as always, for watching this video on Mr. John Holmes.